So as a young man, I met Mr. Bennett quite by accident. And something was compelling, and I found him quite magnetic and agreed to go on a 10-month retreat, as if it oriented me, as if there were a compass inside me that was spinning, and suddenly it felt as if it came to true north. And I felt like I had a direction. So certainly, during those 10 months, we had movements classes once or twice a day. And what we were looking at was, during the day, what came up in our lives. Because though we were on a retreat, there were over 100 people every day together. And we cooked together, and we gardened together, and we took care of the children together. And we went to class together. But what that meant was real life was occurring also. So in the context of what we thought would be an escape from real life, being on a retreat, we found much very similar to our lives before we arrived there. And for the Gurdjieff work, or for Mr. Bennett at that time, this was perfect. How can I have an inner life, vibrant, in the midst of normal life? And that's how Gurdjieff, and then through Ouspensky and other of the students, it became known as the fourth way, not the way of the monk who hides himself away, and not the way of the fakir who works on his body only, maybe lying on a bed of nails, and not the way of the yogi. And that did not mean yoga in that sense. It meant the way of kind of intellectual understanding, Raja Yoga, but an integration of all three. But Gurdjieff felt like what was really needed was that human beings needed to live in this very complex world we are now living in. And since he has died, has become increasingly complex, and still have a path that would somehow allow us to not have all our energy fly out of us into all activity, but somehow possibly have activity be a way to remind us to still have an inner life. Yes, here you are, this is your life. Now, what is the path that can be transformative? And we began to work with particular inner exercises that, though not described now for this purpose in detail, the purpose of which was to try and have simultaneity between everything that was typical in the way we responded to others and to ourselves and to a task like gardening, and at the same time have contact with inner life. The movements were a perfect example of the cacophony of outer life, on the floor with 36 people, each learning in their own way, sometimes traveling and having to displace in front of and behind each other, all trying to remember the movement, some doing it rightly, some doing it wrongly. In a concentrated form, quite like life. But also in a concentrated form, we were given ways to work in the movements class that hopefully we could also generalize and carry into our lives. I think there have been moments of crisis in my life that this way of working has helped me hold in a context. I don't know without this way of working how I would have been or what I would have done, but it is an orientation, a reminder that crisis occurs, difficulties occur. I think this is needed in the world. I started off saying that because I certainly think young adolescent and young men and women could probably benefit from this. All of the lessons that can be learned within a movements class are all of the realizations, if not lessons, all of that which emerges from that which we can learn from in a movements class can certainly generalize and be found, the opportunity to apply it can be found, I think, in anyone's life. But maybe some quality of, there is a life within, while I spend energy also toward the life without. In life, but it's in the movements class, while working simultaneously at trying to engender or give rise to, maintain, as it wants to fade and go away, but they call it back, an inner life. And maybe, because I can't see it, I think the idea is there's a field, and you get close to that field of collective, I don't want to say effort, because that makes it sound a certain way, but close to a field of collective presence that helps facilitate something for you as well. I personally rather prefer to call it a mystery, some ineffable mystery that if we all try to listen to or try to be open to, maybe together there's a kind of awareness of one another, awareness of one's own condition, and maybe just all it takes is a tincture of compassion for a lot to be able to happen between people. And when with others, often, usually, our mask, our personality has to come into play. And that takes us a bit away from this inner quality of being present. Here we work with, of course, we're being called out of ourselves, but we're working to stay with the inner presence. If our own transformative qualities became coherent enough that we too might become channels for something in the world and for the world and with others and for nature, and possibly without even attempting to. It might not be a question of trying, but rather a question of a quality of being. So that the movement and the music, or if it's real life, that which might exist that could be of service to others and ourselves and nature and all species, and that music of the spheres that might make that possible could come through us.